All right, so we're into the last training principle video of the semester. After this, the topics will no longer be just about workout specific things. They will kind of vary in many different avenues, but this is your last video that you need to watch for stuff as it relates to working out. So this is called training specificity. And when you look at the word specificity, if you take out the ITY at the end, it spells the word specific. And the idea behind this principle is that all of your training, whatever you're doing, has to have a specific purpose, meaning you've got to be doing the types of things that are going to help you actually achieve your goal. And we're going to get into that over the course of this video. So the first question that we have to answer is, what is training specificity for sports and resistance training? So these are going to be a little different, but I want you to know both, and you're going to need to know both on the assignments anyways. But training specificity for sports is that sports training should be relevant and specific to the sport the individual is training for. And for general resistance training, training specificity should be specific to the desired training goal, which could be people are training in ways that are going to help them either increase muscle mass, size, endurance, or power. So our second question is, why is training specificity important to use in sports and resistance training? And specificity is important to use because it's important to condition the body to the activities that it's training for. Your training should closely match or mimic the activity for which you wish to improve on. So in sports, this is going to be kind of like you're doing workouts that are going to kind of mimic what you're doing in the games that you're participating in. So this will help you develop muscle memory for the specific actions that you are trying to perform without having to concentrate on them. So for example, let's say you're practicing for something, you're practicing your shooting form in basketball. And after a while, you start practicing it enough, you don't actually have to think about all the different steps that go into your shooting form. You just kind of go and do it. It just happens, and you don't have to think about everything as you do it. And then the resistance training within the right set and rep ranges will help you achieve your desired training goal. Also, just getting practice and perfecting your Form 1 exercises is why specificity is important to use. All right, so the next question is, what are the benefits of using specificity? So in sports, specificity will likely result in increased athletic performance, which will hopefully improve your overall sport performance. So what I mean by athletic performance is if you're doing a type of training for a particular sport, let's say you're doing something in basketball and the program focuses on increasing your speed and agility as well as building strength and stuff like that, those things are likely going to be able to carry over into your sport when you're playing in games and should hopefully help you increase your athletic performance. And if your athletic performance is doing well, then hopefully your sport performance is doing well. However, this depends on some things, right? Like, do you have the fundamental skills of that sport or the knowledge of the game and desire to improve and stuff like that? So just because somebody is really fit and strong and athletic doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be good at sports, because they just need to know, they may not have the fundamental skills, the knowledge, or desire to get better at it. And then for resistance training, the benefits of using specificity are that you will more likely result in improvements in whatever it is you're training for. So like I said, if your goal is to become stronger and you train the right way, you'll likely get stronger. And if your goal is to build more muscle and you do it the right way, then you'll build that muscle. So question 4, these next couple questions are pretty much just for the resistance training side of the discussion. But what are the recommended sets and repetitions for hypertrophy? And hypertrophy is just a fancy way of saying muscle building. And the recommended sets and repetitions for muscle building is roughly around 2 to 4 sets at around 6 to 12 repetitions. And I think between a minute to 2 minutes rest between sets. The 5th question is, what are the recommended sets and repetitions for increasing muscular strength and power? This one's a little different. So your sets are going to be higher. So you're going to be doing likely more sets, around 4 to 6 sets per exercise, but your repetitions are going to be lower. So you'll be doing around 1 to 6 repetitions. And resting between sets like this, where you're pushing yourself really hard for 6 repetitions, you want to have more rest when you're doing that. So roughly 2 to 3 minute rest between sets. And then the last one is, what are the sets and repetitions needed for increasing muscular endurance? And this can be anywhere from, on the lower side of the sets, from 1 to 3 sets. but they're going to have higher repetitions and anywhere from 12 to 30 repetitions in an exercise. So what can happen if you do not use specificity in your training? And the really simple answer is if your training isn't specific to what you're trying to get better at, then you likely won't end up getting better at that activity. So for example, if you are doing sport specific stuff, like maybe you're a cyclist, the best way for you to improve your cycling game is for you to be on the bike actually cycling. Or if you're a swimmer, then you swim, and if you're a runner, you're running, etc. So making sure that your training mimics the actions and skills necessary for the game and activity is really important for your sport specificity. So an example or this on the opposite side of this, or it doesn't make sense for a basketball player or a hockey player to spend a lot of time focusing just on their biceps. So in a lot of exercises, bicep curls, the motions normally you hinge at the elbow and you're bringing your fist kind of up to your shoulder for your bicep contractions. And in basketball games and in hockey games, I could be wrong in saying this, but I just don't think that there's many movements where you're going to be doing that in a game, right? So why would you spend your time training that? Obviously, it's nice to have big biceps, and they're good to have, but they're not necessarily specific to that sport. So they're not something that should really be focused on too much in terms of your sport training programs. Going back to the basketball and hockey examples of exercises that would be good, that have some transferability, like they're going to help you in that sport. Exercises for hockey and basketball could be doing things like squats and leg presses and different things that might help basketball players jump and might help hockey players generate more power. And for our last question of the last training principle video, how are sport training programs different than programs designed for building muscle strength or endurance, so just general resistance training? And sport training programs will likely have activities that focus on increasing things like your speed and agility, and resistance training that is more likely to be focused on building power. So what I mean by that is, like, in sport specific type stuff, you will be doing resistance training, but they're going to be more of a focus on building power rather than trying to build overall muscular size, right? This is because in sports, you will likely need to use things like your speed, agility, and power when you're competing. And then programs focused on just building muscle mass, strength, and endurance are likely not going to have things like speed and agility or power components, just because if you're not training for a sport, then you don't necessarily need to be doing that kind of stuff. It's not really, like, it could be good for you to do for overall, like, cardiovascular conditioning, if that's what you want to do for cardio. But if you aren't really competing in a sport where you need to be doing those types of things, then they're not really necessary to have them in your program.